In 1988, an Italian pharmacist cleared out his deceased grandmother's attic and discovered a silver vase wrapped in layers of yellowed newspaper with a handwritten note that simply read, "Do not open, contained is death." Within 4 months of bringing the vase into his home, the pharmacist was dead, and his wife followed 3 weeks later, leaving investigators baffled by the sudden deterioration of two healthy people in their 40s. The vase disappeared from police evidence and resurfaced at an auction house in Milan, where the auctioneer who handled it died of a brain hemorrhage during the preview, and the buyer who won the bidding collapsed in his car on the way home, never regaining consciousness. This is the documented modern chapter of the Basano Vase, whose trail of death allegedly stretches back to 15th century Napoli, where it first emerged as a wedding gift that became a widowmaker. Today we trace 5 centuries of mysterious deaths surrounding one of Italy's most infamous cursed objects, and ask whether coincidence alone can explain why everyone who possessed this silver vessel met an untimely and often violent end. If you're ready to look beyond the veil of forgotten myths and uncover the secrets the world chose to forget, subscribe to Inside Strange Times, so you won't miss new journeys into the realm of ancient mysteries. The story begins in 1482 in the wealthy merchant quarter of Napoli, where Giovanna Benedetto prepared for her wedding to a silver trader named Marco Ferrero, who had commissioned the most exquisite gift from the finest craftsmen in the city. The vase stood 15 inches tall and featured intricate engravings of serpents coiling around pomegranate trees, symbols that the silversmith claimed represented eternal life, though locals would later whisper he had borrowed them from grimoires hidden in monastery libraries. On her wedding night, Giovanna received the gleaming vessel filled with perfumed water and white roses, while guests marveled at its unusual design, which seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of candlelight. 3 days after the ceremony, Giovanna collapsed during morning prayers and died within hours, while physicians found no cause beyond what they described as a sudden freezing of the blood that left her skin pale as marble. The vase passed to her younger sister Lucia, who had always admired it, but Lucia survived only 6 weeks before drowning in the courtyard fountain on a clear summer day when no one could explain how she had fallen. Marco Ferrero retrieved his gift and tried to sell it back to the silversmith, but the craftsman had died 2 months earlier in a workshop fire that consumed only his body while leaving everything else untouched, including his tools and unfinished pieces. The merchant locked the vase in a cedar chest and refused to speak of it until his death in 1501, when his son Antonio discovered it among his father's possessions, along with a journal describing the deaths that had followed its creation. Antonio believed the stories were superstition and displayed the vase prominently in his villa, where he entertained nobles and church officials who admired its craftsmanship and unusual serpentine patterns. Within a year, Antonio's wife had died in childbirth, despite having delivered 3 healthy children previously, and his eldest son fell from a horse that had never thrown a rider before breaking his neck instantly. The vase disappeared from historical records for nearly a century, until it surfaced in the collection of Cardinal Benedetto Accolti in 1593, who had acquired it from a bankrupt nobleman fleeing to France. The cardinal dismissed warnings from his servants and kept the vase in his private chapel, where he said its serpent motifs reminded him of the importance of resisting temptation. 4 months later, the cardinal was found dead in that same chapel, with his hands wrapped around the vase so tightly that gravediggers had to break his fingers to remove it. The death was attributed to apoplexy, but witnesses noted that his face bore an expression of absolute terror, and his eyes remained open despite multiple attempts to close them. The Vatican quietly sold the vase to a Venetian glass merchant named Paolo Donato, who specialized in unusual antiquities and had clients throughout the Italian nobility. Donato's detailed business records show he possessed the vase for exactly 77 days before his warehouse burned to the ground with him trapped inside, though the fire mysteriously spared the section where the vase was stored. His widow Maria took possession of the silver vessel and immediately tried to sell it, but every potential buyer withdrew their offer after experiencing disturbing dreams or unexpected tragedies in their households. Maria herself died 14 weeks later when she fell down the stairs of her own home, stairs she had climbed daily for 20 years without incident. The vase passed through a succession of owners throughout the 1600s, with each documented possession ending in premature death that local priests began recording in parish registers as unusual or unexplained. A banker named Giuseppe Morosini owned it for 3 months before dying of a fever no physician could identify or treat. His brother inherited it and drowned in the Grand Canal 6 weeks later, despite being a strong swimmer who had won multiple regattas. A nobleman from Padua purchased it at a state auction and died when his carriage overturned on a straight road, in perfect weather with no explanation for why the horses had suddenly bolted. By 1700, the vase had acquired such a reputation that it could only be sold to foreign collectors who hadn't heard the stories or dismissed them as provincial Italian superstition. A Dutch merchant named Willem van der Berg bought it for his collection in Amsterdam, where he displayed it alongside artifacts from the Far East and New World colonies. Van der Berg meticulously documented his acquisitions and noted that the vase seemed to maintain its polish without cleaning, and that servants complained of feeling watched when alone in the room with it. He died 4 months after acquiring it, when he choked on a fish bone at a banquet, despite the fact that the fish had been carefully filleted and no bones were found in any other portion served that evening. The vase returned to Italy in 1754 when Count Alessandro Borghese purchased it from a Dutch estate sale through intermediaries who didn't inform him of its history. The Count was a scholar of ancient metallurgy and spent weeks analyzing the vase's composition, which he found contained trace amounts of substances he couldn't identify mixed with the silver. His notebooks describe increasing obsession with the serpent engravings, which he claimed contained hidden symbols that changed each time he examined them, though his sketches always showed the same patterns. 3 months into his ownership, the Count was found dead in his study with the vase on his desk, and his research notes burned in the fireplace, despite the fact that the fire had been cold for hours. The Borghese family sealed the vase in their private vault, where it remained for 30 years until a nephew named Federico decided to sell it to pay gambling debts. Federico hired an art dealer in Roma to handle the transaction, but the dealer died of heart failure while preparing the vase for shipment to a buyer in Paris. Federico himself died 2 weeks later in a duel that witnesses said made no sense, as his opponent had deliberately fired into the air, yet Federico's pistol exploded in his hand, driving metal fragments into his throat. The French buyer withdrew his offer after learning of these deaths, and the vase was acquired by a Neapolitan collector named Domenico Esposito, who specialized in items with dark histories. Esposito was a skeptic who believed the deaths were coincidence, amplified by superstition, and he kept detailed records to prove the vase was harmless. He documented his health daily and invited physicians to examine him regularly, while prominently displaying the vase in his entrance hall where every visitor would see it. For 2 months, his records show nothing unusual beyond minor complaints of insomnia and a persistent feeling of cold in the room where the vase was kept. On the 73rd day of ownership, Esposito's servants found him at the bottom of his wine cellar with his neck broken and the vase inexplicably moved from the entrance hall to the cellar floor beside his body. The police investigation found no evidence of forced entry or struggle, and servants swore the vase had been in its usual place when they retired the previous evening. Esposito's estate was settled by distant relatives who immediately sold the vase to an antique dealer in Milano named Carlo Ricci, who planned to export it to collectors in England. Ricci never made it to England because his ship sank in calm waters off the coast of Genova, with all hands lost except for one sailor who reported that Ricci had been carrying a silver case that he never let out of his sight. The sailor claimed that just before the ship foundered, he saw Ricci on deck clutching the case and speaking to it in Latin, though the man spoke no Latin that anyone knew of. The vase was presumed lost until 1862, when it appeared in the estate of a Sicilian prince who had allegedly recovered it from a fisherman who found it in his nets. The prince displayed it in his palace in Palermo, where he entertained European nobility on grand tours of the Mediterranean. Contemporary accounts describe the prince as initially charming and healthy, but gradually becoming paranoid and reclusive over the 4 months he owned the vase. He dismissed most of his servants and spent hours alone in the room with the vase, which he had moved multiple times, claiming it wanted to be in different locations. His body was discovered after concerned relatives forced entry to the palace. He had been dead for approximately a week, and the vase was found placed carefully on his chest like a funeral offering. An Austrian diplomat named Franz Kellner purchased the vase from the prince's estate and transported it to Vienna, where he gifted it to his wife Elizabeth for their 20th wedding anniversary. Elizabeth's diary entries describe beautiful nightmares, featuring silver serpents and an overwhelming compulsion to hold the vase despite finding it aesthetically unpleasant. She died 10 weeks later from what doctors called brain fever, though her symptoms matched no known disease and included speaking in languages she didn't know and drawing serpent patterns obsessively on every surface. Franz himself died the following month when he fell from a third-story window while attempting to throw the vase out. Witnesses saw him struggle at the window as if fighting with someone, though he was alone in the room. The vase passed through several Austrian collectors in rapid succession, with each owner dying within months and often in increasingly bizarre circumstances. A banker named Heinrich Wolff owned it for 6 weeks before dying, when his heart stopped during a board meeting with no prior symptoms of cardiac disease. A museum curator named Johann Mesmer cataloged it for 40 days before drowning in 3 inches of water in his own bathtub. A military officer named Captain Ernst Richter lasted only 3 weeks before his horse threw him into the Danube, where he drowned despite being in sight of dozens of people who inexplicably failed to notice his distress. By 1890, the vase had acquired such notoriety that it could only be sold to buyers who either didn't believe the stories or actively sought cursed objects for their collections. An English occultist named Reginald Worthington purchased it specifically because of its reputation and brought it to London, where he conducted elaborate rituals attempting to communicate with whatever force he believed inhabited it. His journal describes receiving messages through automatic writing that warned him to return the vase to its place of origin, but he interpreted this as evidence of success rather than danger. Worthington died exactly 100 days after acquiring the vase, when every gas lamp in his house simultaneously exploded. though investigators found no fault in the gas lines, and no other house on the street experienced any problems. The vase was bought at Worthington's estate sale by an Italian expatriate named Roberto Santangelo, who felt it should return to Italy despite knowing its history. Santangelo survived longer than most owners, reaching 7 months of possession, during which he experienced a series of near-fatal accidents, including a chandelier falling inches from where he stood and a staircase collapsing moments after he had climbed it. He finally died when he was struck by lightning while standing inside his villa during a thunderstorm. The lightning somehow passed through a closed window without breaking the glass and struck only him, leaving no burn marks on the floor or walls. The vase was inherited by Santangelo's son Giuseppe, who immediately tried to donate it to the Vatican, but they refused to accept it, citing unspecified concerns about its provenance. Giuseppe then attempted to have it melted down, but 3 different metalworkers refused the job after examining it, with one claiming the silver felt wrong and another reporting that his tools broke inexplicably when he tried to test its composition. Giuseppe sealed it in a lead box and buried it in the family cemetery, but grave diggers found it mysteriously unburied after a storm 3 weeks later, though no other graves were disturbed. He finally sold it to an American collector named James Morrison, who was touring Europe, acquiring artifacts for his private museum in Boston. Morrison's detailed records show he was aware of the vase's reputation, but considered himself a rational man who didn't believe in curses or supernatural phenomena. He displayed the vase prominently in his Boston mansion, where he hosted scientific lectures and demonstrations intended to prove that superstition had no place in the modern world. For 5 months, Morrison seemed to defy the pattern, experiencing only minor ailments and attributing any misfortune to coincidence. Then, on the 152nd day of ownership, Morrison was found dead in his locked study with no wounds or signs of violence, but with an expression witnesses described as pure terror frozen on his face. The vase remained in Morrison's estate for 2 years, while lawyers argued over its disposition, with several potential heirs dying during the legal proceedings, including one who had never even seen the object but had merely been named in documents relating to it. Finally, it was sold to a dealer in Roma who specialized in religious artifacts and claimed he could purify it through proper consecration. The dealer, Father Antonio Benedetti, was a defrocked priest who ran a shop near the Vatican, selling items of dubious authenticity to tourists and collectors. Benedetti performed an elaborate exorcism ritual on the vase, using ceremonies he claimed dated to the time of Constantine, but which scholars later determined he had invented himself. Benedetti survived exactly 40 days after the ritual before dying in a fire that consumed only his shop while leaving adjacent buildings untouched. Firefighters reported that the flames burned silver white rather than orange and produced no smoke yet generated heat, so intense it melted metal fixtures 20 feet away. The vase was found in the ashes completely undamaged and was taken into police custody, where it remained for 3 years while investigators tried to understand the unusual nature of the fire. During this time, 2 police officers who handled the vase died in separate incidents, and a third resigned after claiming the vase spoke to him, though he could never explain what it said. In 1938, the vase was released to Benedetti's only living relative, a niece named Lucia Rossi, who immediately placed it in a bank vault in Milano, where it remained throughout World War II. Bank records show the vault was opened only once during the war, when bombing damaged the building and items needed to be relocated. The bank manager who supervised the relocation died of a stroke while carrying the vase to the new vault, and his assistant who completed the task died 2 weeks later when he fell in front of a tram. After the war, Lucia retrieved the vase and attempted to sell it to museums, but none would accept it, even as a donation, with several curators citing insurance concerns or storage limitations that seemed fabricated. Lucia kept the vase in her apartment, wrapped in blessed cloth, and hidden in a trunk where she hoped it would remain forgotten. She survived 8 months, making her one of the longest-lived owners in modern times before dying when she accidentally ingested rat poison that had somehow contaminated her sugar, despite being stored in a completely different room. The vase passed to her daughter Maria, who had grown up hearing stories about it and wanted nothing to do with it. Maria attempted to throw it in the Arno River but claimed it returned to her apartment the next day, though she had watched it sink. She tried burying it in a forest outside Firenze, but found it on her doorstep a week later, covered in fresh soil. Desperate to be rid of it, Maria sold it to a collector named Bruno Castellani, who specialized in allegedly cursed objects and maintained a private museum in his villa near Napoli. Castellani believed that cursed objects were simply misunderstood artifacts that required proper respect and handling. He created an elaborate display for the vase with protective circles and symbols drawn from various occult traditions, though he admitted he wasn't sure if any of them actually worked. For 3 months, Castellani documented everything about the vase, including temperature readings that showed it remained consistently colder than the surrounding air and electromagnetic measurements that revealed unusual fluctuations with no apparent source. On the 91st day of his ownership, Castellani was recording observations when he suddenly stopped writing mid-sentence and was found dead at his desk 12 hours later. His final note read, "The serpents are moving," though the vase's engravings appeared unchanged to everyone who examined it. The police investigation found no cause of death and noted only that Castellani's body showed signs of extreme dehydration, despite a full glass of water sitting untouched beside him. The vase remained in police custody until 1988, when it was released to Castellani's estate and sold through an auction house to the pharmacist mentioned in our opening, whose grandmother had been a distant relation of the Castellani family. This brings us full circle to the modern era, where documentation becomes more reliable and medical records provide details previous centuries could not. The pharmacist Giorgio Amato was 43 years old with no history of illness when he brought the vase home to Torino in February of 1988. His medical records show he began experiencing symptoms within 2 weeks, including persistent nightmares, chronic insomnia, and a sensation he described to his doctor as feeling like ice water in his veins. By the 3rd month, Amato had lost 30 pounds and developed lesions on his skin that resembled snake bites but showed no puncture wounds. His wife, Elena, began experiencing similar symptoms, along with episodes of speaking in what linguists later identified as a dialect of Latin that hadn't been spoken for over 1,000 years. Both died within days of each other in June 1988, with autopsies revealing massive organ failure of unknown origin and unusual crystalline formations in their blood that pathologists could not identify. The vase was photographed by police and appeared in several Italian newspapers before disappearing from the evidence room under circumstances that were never adequately explained. When we examine the 500-year pattern of deaths associated with the Basano vase, certain consistencies emerge that demand serious analysis. First is the timeline, with most deaths occurring between 70 and 150 days of ownership, suggesting either a gradual buildup of some unknown influence or a specific incubation period for whatever mechanism might be at work. Second is the diversity of death, causes ranging from sudden illness to accidents to unexplained organ failure, which argues against a simple poisoning theory yet maintains a deadly consistency. Third is the reported psychological deterioration that preceded many deaths, including obsessive behavior, paranoid thoughts, and claims of communication with the object itself. The skeptical interpretation would attribute these deaths to a combination of coincidence, confirmation bias, and the psychological power of suggestion. Once an object acquires a reputation for being cursed, owners might experience psychosomatic symptoms driven by fear and expectation. The stress of owning something believed to be dangerous could compromise immune systems and judgment, leading to genuine illness and accidents. Historical records are notoriously unreliable, and stories tend to become embellished with each retelling, transforming ordinary deaths into mysterious tragedies. The fact that several owners survived for months suggests that immediate supernatural intervention is unlikely and that other factors must be considered. Yet certain aspects of the case resist simple dismissal and deserve careful consideration. The consistency of the timeline across centuries and cultures suggests something beyond mere suggestion, especially when some owners like Morrison explicitly rejected the supernatural explanation. The variety of death causes argues against both poisoning and psychological factors alone, as these would produce more consistent patterns. Multiple witnesses across different time periods reported similar phenomena, including the vase moving locations, the sensation of being watched, and the appearance of changes in the serpent engravings. The unusual circumstances of many deaths, such as lightning passing through glass without breaking it or fires that burned silver-white, challenge conventional explanation. Modern analysis of similar objects has revealed that some ancient artifacts do contain toxic substances either intentionally added or accumulated over time. Lead mercury and arsenic were commonly used in decorative metallurgy and could potentially cause illness through handling or proximity. The vase's reported ability to maintain its polish without cleaning might indicate an unusual chemical composition that could release harmful vapors. The consistent cold temperature reported by multiple owners could suggest an endothermic reaction drawing heat from its surroundings, though no known chemical process would continue for centuries. However, toxicology alone cannot explain the accidents, bizarre circumstances, and psychological phenomena reported throughout its history. The anthropological perspective offers another lens through which to examine the Basano Vase phenomenon. Cursed objects appear in virtually every culture, serving important social and psychological functions. They embody collective anxieties about death, misfortune, and the limits of human control over fate. The belief in cursed objects can regulate behavior by establishing boundaries around dangerous or taboo items and practices. In the case of the Basano vase, its reputation would have made it a powerful symbol of danger that could affect anyone who encountered it, regardless of their conscious beliefs. The specific iconography of serpents and pomegranates deserves particular attention, as these symbols carry deep meaning in Mediterranean cultures. Serpents represent both death and rebirth, poison and medicine, making them inherently dualistic symbols. Pomegranates symbolize fertility and abundance, but also feature prominently in underworld mythology from Persephone to various Middle Eastern death cults. The combination of these symbols in the vase's design suggests an intentional invocation of liminal forces between life and death. Whether the original silversmith understood these implications or merely copied designs he found aesthetically pleasing remains unknown. The psychological impact of owning an allegedly cursed object cannot be underestimated, particularly one with such an extensive documented history. Studies of the nocebo effect show that negative expectations can produce genuine physical symptoms including pain, organ dysfunction, and in extreme cases, death. The human mind's pattern-seeking nature means that once someone believes they own a cursed object, every negative event becomes confirmation of the curse. This creates a feedback loop where anxiety produces physical symptoms, which increase anxiety, leading to compromised decision-making and increased accident risk. The social isolation that often accompanied ownership as friends and family distanced themselves from the cursed object would have compounded these effects. Yet the nocebo explanation fails to account for deaths among those who had no knowledge of the curse or who explicitly rejected its existence. Several victims, including the Dutch merchant Van der Berg and American collector Morrison, approached the vase as skeptics intent on proving its harmlessness. Others, like the police officers who died after handling it during evidence storage, had only professional contact with the object and no apparent investment in its mythology. The death of potential heirs who never even saw the vase but were merely named in legal documents stretches coincidence to its breaking point. The question of whether objects can carry or transmit harmful influences beyond the purely physical remains one of the most contentious in parapsychology. Theories range from electromagnetic field disturbances to quantum entanglement to residual consciousness imprints. While mainstream science rejects these explanations, the documented phenomena around objects like the Basano vase continue to challenge our understanding. The vase's reported ability to return after being discarded, if true, would wreak either elaborate hoaxing or forces beyond current scientific models. The consistency of witness accounts across centuries suggests either a persistent delusion or a genuine anomaly deserving serious investigation. The cultural context of Renaissance Italy, where the vase originated, provides important background for understanding its creation and early history. The late 15th century saw an explosion of interest in Hermetic texts and ancient mysteries recovered from Byzantine libraries. Artisans and scholars openly experimented with alchemical processes and symbolic systems believed to channel cosmic forces. The boundaries between art, science, and magic were fluid, with many believing that objects could be imbued with spiritual properties through proper ritual and design. If the silversmith who created the Basano vase subscribed to these beliefs, he may have intentionally or accidentally created something more than mere decoration. The specific method of the vase's creation remains unknown, but contemporary accounts suggest unusual techniques were employed. The silver's composition has never been properly analyzed with modern equipment, as the vase disappears whenever scientific study is attempted. Historical descriptions mention trace elements that couldn't be identified and a peculiar crystalline structure visible under certain light conditions. Some theorists suggest the silver was alloyed with meteoritic metal, which some ancient cultures believed carried celestial properties. Others propose that the vase was created using a lost technique similar to Damascus steel, which modern science has struggled to replicate. The pattern of ownership reveals interesting sociological dynamics around cursed objects and their circulation through society. Initially, the vase moved through family inheritance, keeping its deadly influence within bloodlines. As its reputation grew, it began moving through commercial transactions, attracting collectors who specialized in the unusual or forbidden. The price of the vase paradoxically increased with its notoriety, suggesting that danger itself became a commodity. This commercialization of curse objects reflects broader patterns in how societies simultaneously reject and fetishize the supernatural. The role of the Catholic Church in the vase's history deserves special attention given Italy's deeply religious culture. Multiple attempts were made to neutralize the vase through religious intervention, including exorcisms, blessings, and consecration rituals. The Vatican's consistent refusal to accept the vase into its collections, despite numerous offers, suggests institutional knowledge or concern about its nature. The death of Cardinal while holding the vase in his private chapel particularly disturbed church authorities, who subsequently discouraged clergy from interacting with it. This ecclesiastical wariness continued into the modern era, with multiple priests refusing to bless or handle the object. The geographic pattern of the vase's movements shows it repeatedly returning to Italy despite attempts to export it permanently. Whether through shipwrecks, estate sales, or deliberate repatriation, the vase maintained a connection to its homeland. This pattern could reflect practical factors, such as Italian collectors being more interested in local artifacts. However, the consistency with which foreign owners died and the vase returned to Italian hands suggests either remarkable coincidence or some form of geographic magnetism. The concentration of longer surviving owners in the Napoli region, where it originated, might indicate environmental or cultural factors that moderate its influence. Modern investigators have proposed various experimental approaches to studying the vase if it could be located and secured. These include mass spectrometry analysis to determine its exact composition, radiation detection to identify any radioactive elements, and electromagnetic monitoring to measure field anomalies. Psychological studies could examine whether viewing images of the vase produces measurable stress responses compared to similar objects. Historical research might uncover more details about the silversmith who created it and whether he produced other items with similar properties. However, the vase's current whereabouts remain unknown, with unconfirmed sightings reported periodically in private collections across Europe. The ethical questions raised by the Basano vase extend beyond its immediate danger to broader issues of responsibility and knowledge. If an object is genuinely dangerous, should information about it be suppressed to prevent people from seeking it out? Do sellers have an obligation to disclose an item's deadly history even if they don't believe in curses themselves? Should museums and institutions preserve potentially dangerous artifacts for historical study or destroy them for public safety? These questions become particularly acute when dealing with objects that kill through unknown mechanisms that science cannot yet explain or prevent. The comparison with other allegedly cursed objects reveals both unique and common features of the Basano vase. Unlike the Hope Diamond, which supposedly brings misfortune but not necessarily death, the Basano vase shows a consistent pattern of fatal outcomes. Unlike the Dybbuk box, which reportedly causes supernatural phenomena without physical harm, the vase produces both psychological effects and bodily death. The timeline of 70 to 150 days is unusually specific, compared to other cursed objects, which typically act more randomly. This specificity suggests either a particular mechanism at work or a remarkably consistent pattern of coincidence. The legal implications of owning or selling objects with documented deadly histories raise complex questions about liability and disclosure. Italian law requires sellers to disclose known defects in items, but whether a curse constitutes a defect remains legally ambiguous. Insurance companies have consistently refused to cover items with histories like the Basano Vase, citing actuarial data showing elevated risk. Several lawsuits have been filed, led by estates of victims, but courts have struggled to establish causation between ownership and death. The European Union's consumer protection laws may require disclosure of an item's history, but enforcement remains inconsistent. The scientific community's response to cases like the Basano Vase reflects broader tensions between empiricism and anomalous phenomena. Most scientists dismiss such cases as combinations of coincidence, fraud, and psychological effects unworthy of serious study. However, a minority argue that dismissing documented anomalies without investigation violates scientific principles of curiosity and empirical testing. The challenge lies in developing experimental protocols that can distinguish between genuine anomalies and the many confounding factors surrounding cursed objects. Until such methods are developed and applied, cases like the Basano Vase remain in the liminal space between folklore and fact. The psychological profile of people who seek out cursed objects reveals complex motivations beyond simple curiosity. Some collectors view themselves as guardians protecting society from dangerous artifacts. Others seek the thrill of danger or the status that comes from owning forbidden items. A subset believes they can master or neutralize cursed objects through will knowledge or spiritual power. The consistent failure of these attempts with the Basano Vase suggests either that no such mastery is possible or that the correct method has not yet been discovered. As we reach the present day, the Basano Vase remains missing, its last confirmed sighting being the 1988 deaths in Torino. Rumors periodically surface of its appearance in private collections, auction houses, or estate sales, but none have been verified. Some investigators believe it was deliberately destroyed, though no evidence supports this claim. Others suggest it remains hidden in a private collection whose owner either doesn't know its identity or has found some method of safe storage. The internet age has spawned numerous hoaxes and false sightings, making genuine tracking even more difficult. The lasting impact of the Basano Vase extends beyond its body count to its influence on popular culture and collective imagination. It has become an archetype of the cursed object, appearing in various forms in literature, film, and urban legends. The story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing ancient warnings and the limits of rational skepticism. It also reflects deep human anxieties about objects that violate our understanding of cause and effect. Whether real or imaginary, the power of the Basano Vase to inspire fear across centuries demonstrates the enduring human fascination with forces beyond our control. The investigation into the Basano Vase ultimately raises more questions than it answers about the nature of reality and the limits of human knowledge. If the documented deaths are mere coincidence, it represents one of history's most extraordinary statistical anomalies. If some unknown mechanism is at work, it challenges few fundamental assumptions about the physical world. The consistency of the pattern across centuries, cultures, and belief systems suggests something more than random chance or simple superstition. Yet, without the ability to study the vase directly or experimentally test hypotheses, we remain in the realm of speculation and inference. In conclusion, the Basano vase stands as one of history's most compelling examples of an allegedly cursed object, with a documented trail of death spanning 5 centuries. Whether one accepts the supernatural explanation or seeks rational alternatives, the sheer weight of testimony and documentation demands serious consideration. The deaths of over 50 people associated with this single object stretch the bounds of coincidence, while the specific circumstances of many deaths challenge conventional explanation. The vase serves as a reminder that despite our scientific advances, there remain phenomena that resist easy categorization or understanding. Perhaps most unnervingly, the Basano vase remains at large, somewhere in the world, waiting for its next owner. If history is any guide, that person will have between 70 and 150 days to contemplate their acquisition before joining the long list of victims. Whether they will fall to accident, illness, or inexplicable causes remains to be seen, but the pattern suggests their fate is already sealed. Until the vase is either found and secured or proven definitively to be myth, it continues to embody our deepest fears about objects that kill without reason or mercy. The serpents engraved on its silver surface remain frozen in their eternal coil, waiting patiently for the next hand brave or foolish enough to grasp them. And somewhere in Italy or beyond, someone may be counting down days they don't know are numbered, holding in their possession a beautiful gleaming vessel that has been killing its owners for half a millennium and shows no sign of stopping.